Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paranormal the New Normal. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy, here to try to guide you into some realm of normalcy in this world. Does it ever really freaking happen? Let's be honest. It happens like on one out of every 50 episodes, but we try, and that's all that matters. On that epic quest, though, I bring with me a guest, as always. My guest today, and let's see if I fuck this up. My guest today is Sadhu, a forest shaman of the Thai animistic traditions. And that's honestly the best way I could describe him because I don't want to describe him wrong. But how you doing today, Sadhu?
Not too bad. And currently in Malaysia, so it's morning for me while it's night for most of you.
Yeah, well, I got viewers from all over the world, so that might not necessarily be true for everybody, but for most of us, yes,
Ooh.
it is. It is close to bedtime for most of us watching, but for some of those, they may be having their coffee with you and breaking on down. So let's start off the show the same way I start off every show. What brought you down this spiritual path you're on?
I get asked that a lot, and I mean, the general story, a man who met a monk, that kind of deal, had some paranormal experiences. But really, if I were to simplify it, after all these years, what really led me down this whole spiritual path was realizing that I don't really understand or know any of what is actually going on in this crazy thing that we call life. And outside of the regular structures of learning, like school and taxes and daily responsibilities and etc., I knew that there was a lot more that you just couldn't learn necessarily in the normal settings that we're exposed to in our daily lives. And I wanted to find out where to go and what to do to learn more.
Makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. The quest for knowledge, the quest that we are all, well, we all should be on. I'm not gonna say we're all on it because a lot of us don't try to learn, and that's part of the problem. But we all should be on this quest for knowledge, and I hope anyone who listens to my show is on that quest because there's been a lot of knowledge passed through these last 200 episodes from various people. So not me, but my guest mainly. But I ain't gonna try to lie and say I'm passing the knowledge down. I ain't passing no knowledge down. I mean, if I do, then you got a gem. But I mean, it ain't normalcy. So I guess to start off, how I guess well, okay, how do I phrase this? What was your belief system like when you were brought up? Like, what were you brought up to believe in?
Um, hmm. I was originally brought up to believe in Christianity, mainly
Yes,
by the influence of my parents.
of course.
And I always had questions that were considered taboo, even though they were genuine questions. And to this day, I don't have any issue or problem with any sort of organized religion. It's just not my personal choice. But I did find that as I was growing up under this specific bubble of thought, that the questions I had were too strange for people and couldn't be answered. And naturally, with a curious mind, what does that lead to? It leads to you leaving that bubble and searching for where you can get those answers.
Of course. I mean, I I can relate. I was brought up Christian as well, and I had questions. I didn't get answered. It didn't lead me down any type of path, quite, I would say. I just didn't. I had questions that wouldn't get answered, and it kind of disillusioned me with the whole idea of organized religion completely. And yeah, I mean, I will say, as my listeners know, I have a problem with organized religion, many problems, but we won't go into that. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic. So you said you met this monk, and I can only hope he wasn't a monkey king. But I, you met this monk, and how'd you meet this monk? Did you find him in your travels, or did he come
Uh,
to you?
so Originally, I had gone to this temple that was in the States that was affiliated with Theravada Buddhism. So it was a Thai temple in the U.S. And I met a monk there who just struck up a conversation with me. I wasn't even looking for Buddhism. I wasn't really doing anything other than killing some time. And there was a temple in the area. And I just said, screw it. Let's go check it out. Something to do. And so I ended up having an interesting conversation with the monk, but it was more so how the monk treated me. That was what drew my interest. And what I mean by that is this monk just kind of started talking to me as I was like looking at some statues and explaining what they were and telling me a little bit about Dhamma and Buddhism as a whole. And then these people, like local people, kind of like walked up, and then they were trying to talk to the monk. Just like a little thing for those who may not be aware, in Buddhism, monks are like celebrities are in like Western culture. Like people want FaceTime with them. They want to talk to them. Like Gippy the monk, that's pretty much how it is in that culture. So these people were coming up, and then this monk just like turned around and chastised them. He was like, you were sitting there saying that like this man is sketchy and he has tattoos and he's skulking around the temple and he might be stealing something, and you came and you reported him to the monks, and now that I'm talking to this man, you want to come and talk to me. This is a perfectly fine gentleman. There's nothing wrong with him. Did you even ask him his name? Did you even bother talking to him, or did you just judge him immediately based on appearance? And so he just kind of sent them away like with like judgment on them as well. And I was like, all right, dude, like you're pretty cool. So that was the moment of bonding right there. It was just, I never even thought for a second that I was being judged by him. And I didn't know that I was being judged by the other people around. And, he kind of just took me under his wing after that.
See that right there. I've actually heard a similar story earlier today in a podcast, on Let's Not Meet podcast, because I gotta give credit where credit's due. And basically, it was a story of an Indian guy on a plane because he traveled back and forth through India for business a lot, and this white woman just stared at him and said, like, kept staring at him in the lobby, saying, like, "How'd you get through security? How'd you get through security?" And then she ended up sitting next to him on the plane, and all of a sudden she started screaming, "He's got a bomb! He's got a bomb!" And that he was actually like taken off the plane, and like they did the whole 9 yards, searched his bags, questioned him, and like they put him back in the plane. Like, you didn't do anything. There's nothing wrong here. So it's just like, I hate when that happens. The judgment by appearance alone is just horrible in this nation and the world. It's not just this nation; it's the whole world. I mean, people judge people just by looking at them, and that's not the way anybody should live. That's the monk was all in the right there. I applaud the monk for doing that to those people, because he pushed a bunch of Karens and put them in their place, which that's freaking amazing. That's an amazing story right there. I like that. I would have instantly thought he was cool too, and start and talk to him more. I mean, that's that's amazing. So I'm assuming after this that you started going back to that temple a lot more.
I did. And I started to learn things like walking meditation and concepts of stillness and learning kata, like mantra and chants. And he started to show me some of like the rituals and like ceremonies, explaining some of the deities, stories of the Buddha, the Dhamma, etc., etc. And eventually the opportunity to go to Thailand with him presented itself. And it was one of those, but there's a caveat to it. So he told me, he said, "Hey, I've been talking with some of the senior abbots here at the temple, and I have to go back to Thailand for a little bit. And they put together some money, some funds. If you would like to come, we'll pay for your trip, round trip ticket, and you can come with me. But there's one condition. You will have to stay at the temple. You can't leave the temple, and you're going to not be a monk, but you will live with us and follow by our schedule and wake when we eat when we eat, and study how we study. If you're okay with that, you're more than welcome to come." So I said, sure, I want to go to Thailand. So I went there and oh my God, I got humbled. I got humbled hard. Monk life is not easy. You wake
No.
up at like 5 in the morning. You have to do this meditation when the one thing that was on my mind was I need sleep, I need coffee, either or. I don't need to sit here. My back's hurting. Like, I had nothing but complaints in my mind. And then it started to reach a point where certain aspects of my mind and personality kind of altered a little bit. And certain things that I carried and held on for many years started to dissolve. And I only became aware because I noticed they weren't there. And when I came back to the US, I was a changed man in several ways. And then that led to a further path of development and practice, which eventually led to, for the past few years, me living here in Asia full time now.
Which that's, I mean, that sounds awesome, actually. I mean, it really does. And I'm not the one who agrees with that. Hello, Harley. Thank you for joining. And Harley actually says that would be awesome to learn from monks. Which, I mean, see, growing up, I mean, I knew about different monks and different religions, but the monks that I always thought about growing up were, the Catholic monks, the Christian monks who, I mean, and you hear some horror stories from those sects, you really do. But as I got older and I took an Eastern religion class in college, I learned about monks in Buddhism and the other ones I can't think of right now for some reason. I'm blank. Taoism and all these other different religions in the East. And I mean, yeah, no, a monk's life is not easy. No way in hell is it easy. I mean, are they? They're not the. I'm assuming they're not the silent type, right? Not the ones who have to stay silent
No,
24/7.
these would be more along the types that follow Vipassana practices, which is like the silent meditations. Um, these monks that I've gotten to know in Thailand, and I still spend a lot of time with them. I'm in Malaysia right now, but 2 weeks ago I was in Thailand for a month. I kind of alternate all around. A few months ago I was in Nepal. I'm bouncing around Southeast Asia all year round constantly. But when so the one of the monks that I know really well, the first one I met, his name's Thanaful. So Thanaful had very strange ways of like fighting the man, as they say. And it's funny because even in Buddhism and even when we think of like the picturesque portrait of a monk, you can imagine how much it breaks you inside in the best way when you're rushed in the evening. Okay, come with me, and I think I'm going to learn something or see something interesting or cool. And he leads me out into this forest path, and we go off for a little bit, a few minutes of walking, and we come into this like small clearing, and he pulls out this little Walkman, and he starts poker face, poker face, and I'm like, what? And he's like, I come out here sometimes. He's like, when the other monks are sleeping, he's like, I like to listen to Lady Gaga. We're not supposed to, but he's like, I love to listen to Lady Gaga and smoke cigarette in the forest. We're not supposed to do that either. And it's just like, what is going on here? So I mean, it's not how you would picture. And I mean, most of these monks have smartphones now these days. It's really interesting the view we have in our mind and what reality is in these settings.
It's, I mean, yeah, a lot of monks have modernized a little bit, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. I mean, with smartphones, they can spread the message out even more. That's the great thing. I've had I've had I wouldn't call him a monk on, but I had a lama on, which is kind of similar in a way. And
It's
he,
the Bon or Tibetan equivalent of a monk.
yeah, I'm not gonna try to pronounce his name because I'm gonna fuck it up. But it's funny because he was born autistic, so he started practicing this because it helped him control his autism. And he basically, and he's a huge Star Wars lover, so all his meditations that he does on LinkedIn and on all his socials every day are all Star Wars themed.
Love
which
it.
is I love it. I love it. I love it. He was one of my more recent guests. He was so great to talk to. I mean, I love they're just such good people. I mean, they're such good people in all these other faiths. Like it's so different than talking to someone from the Catholic or Christian faith because like there's so much more peaceful and so much more things bother them, but they don't flip out about it. They deal with it and then they try to just let things not get to them, which is great. I love that. It's how I lived my life my whole life. I never realized that it was just me basically trying to be I don't know. I mean, I would hell, if I didn't have kids to worry about and a wife, I would love to go to Thailand and do that. I mean, I would even be one of those tourists to be like, "What do you mean I can't leave? What do you mean I'm gonna get to go hang out with the elephants?" Like, I'd be fine with it. I'd be fine. I'd be perfectly fine with it. Like, it'd be a new way of living life. That's interesting. That's a great way to do things. And yes, Harley, I know he was one of your favorite guests I had. I know that. He was a fun guy. Llama, God, I'm gonna forget his name. It's gonna kill me. But yeah, he was a fun Lama Jigme. That was his name. I had to go look at my notes for that one. But so and well, I guess the next question would be is there like levels like that you can get to with these monks? Is there like different levels like there is in like the Catholic Church, deacon, blah blah blah.
There definitely is. So the simplified order of things is when you begin, you're an initiate, right? You've agreed to take the vows, you wear white, you shave your head, you go through kind of like the initiation, right? And then after that, you're a novice monk. You have to study the Dhamma, you have to learn. And a lot of times you're like working like in Thailand on like temple restoration. So like they'll be like repairing, thatching roofs and helping to build statues and things of this nature. And then when you get a little bit older, then you start to get sent out kind of. I mean, I don't like using the word missionary because it conjures a certain image in our mind, but you get sent out on work where you're basically going out, talking to people, helping and presenting yourself where you're needed and being funded by the temple to do this because you don't get paid. You receive donations, and the temple oftentimes will give you the money or people will directly give you money. Then you reach kind of what you could call the pinnacle of it in a sense, and that is what they call Longpo. Longpo means like Heavenly Father. In the Thai tradition, it's the equivalent rank of basically being a saint in Catholicism. So when you reach that level, you're treated with a lot of respect and you can pretty much get away with anything. Perfect example, my teacher's teacher, Lumpo Kek, was arguably one of the most famous Thai monks in the past 100 years. He's been deceased now for 6 years. He lived to be 103 years old. He smoked like a chimney till the day he died. The man was insanely badass, is one way to put it. He wore Gucci sunglasses, which were donated to him, and he just wore them because they were donated. He didn't buy them, but he wore these Gucci sunglasses. He had a yak fur seat cover. Anywhere he went, he would sit on this yak fur. He was sent all over Southeast Asia. He even went to the U.S. several times. And he was called on by the Thai king numerous times to read the king's fortune. And this man, anytime he made amulets, they sold out. His amulets that he has like left behind, essentially the last ones he made, are now worth like 100 times what they were when they originally sold. But one of the most interesting things about him is, so smoking anything, but like we're talking specifically about cigarettes, that's a monk is not allowed to smoke. That's like a violation of the code. You can't do that. Lumpo Kak had so much reverence by the people that they would be in the middle of ceremonies inside of a temple, in the temple hall, and he would just light up a cigarette and start ashing on the floor in the middle of the frickin' temple, man. And nobody Nobody would say a word to him. If I were to go to a temple and I were to be in the parking lot sneaking a cigarette, I might get somebody staring at me like I'm doing something wrong, or I might have a monk come up and tell me I can't smoke at the temple.
Like,
It's quite something what the levels of in monkhood what you can get. But I'm not a monk.
well,
I'm an ajarn.
which that's actually a good segue because what is a genre? Like, what is a good definition of that? Because I was gonna put that in my title for you, but I one didn't want to pronounce it wrong, and two wasn't exactly sure what it was, so I didn't want to put it in the title because I'm like I don't like putting things in there I don't know what they when I don't know what they are.
So an ajarn is the Thai translation into English means teacher, but specifically in the category of what we're talking about, it's an occult teacher. So an ajarn practices different classifications of magic that, because of brief history lesson for you, the old region known as Siam, before it was Thailand, pre 14th
Yeah.
century, was heavily influenced by what is now Myanmar, Cambodia, and
Hmm.
also Malaysia, Vietnam, Laos. Here's Thailand right here in the middle of this little region. And it was influenced by the different spiritual cultures and practices of these different countries. And it was deeply, deeply animistic of the land, spirit worship, etc. Then around the 14th century, the king decided we are now going to become Buddhist. And as we've seen happen with some African cultures um, trying to convert to Catholicism and Christianity, and how they masked the worship of their deities behind using the imagery of saints. And we've birthed basically new sub religions from this, the creation of this. You could not stamp out the old animist traditions. And because of that, Buddhism blended with the animism. So magic, which is not a part of Buddhism at all, became so deeply intertwined with it through the development of the culture to the modern day point where now you cannot separate the magic from Buddhism. They are one and the same. They're not, at least in Thailand, it's not the same if you take the magic out of it. So you have amulets, you have prayers and rituals and ceremonies and things that are all very occult in nature.
Which I mean, just to clarify for my audience, when you say occult, I'm assuming you don't mean like satanic or anything like that.
No, so occult, if we go by the definition of occult, we're talking about that which is hidden or unseen. And so
Yeah.
in this context, what we are referencing is that the occult traditions are the more secret practices that aren't necessarily commonly understood, but are commonly practiced by people. Case in point, you have these gods that are known as Lucy, and they are essentially the wizened sages. Think of them. This might be a good way to like look at it. Think of it as like the Force when Obi-Wan Kenobi dies, right? Qui-Gon Jinn, right? They come back as these like spectral masters. They were
Force Ghost, yep.
human. They had a certain level of cultivation in the Force. Then they died, and then they come back and they still teach as this spectral like gatekeeper of knowledge and distilling, the Force to their students, and they can be called upon for wisdom in certain ways. That's what the Lursi are essentially. And so these are not deities in the sense of creatures from another dimension, but they are humans that reached a certain point of development in their consciousness and have chosen to remain around. They're not Buddhas, they're not monks, they're not enlightened, but they're kind of like your Obi-Wans and your Qui-Gon Jinns. And people will call to them with certain prayers and certain offerings. The average person doesn't necessarily know what all these rituals are, but they know what the Lursi are. And they'll go to an Ajahn and they'll ask him to make a blessing or an amulet or do a ritual to give them certain favor or something from this Lucy god or from these different type of spirit like the Naga, the Payanak, etc.
Yeah, all right, that's a good way to put it. That does make sense. That just as soon as you said Obi-Wan, I was like, okay, I get it, I get it. Like, see, I'm happy I said that earlier about the llama because that makes perfect sense. So, and I've taken a look at your website and I could see that you do offer certain services that I imagine are part of this being a jarn, which
Yes,
so
some of them are really weird. Like you have these classifications of magic which are known as Wicca, Wicha. And Wicca is just the Thai word that means like magical classification systems. One of them being um, Sanye Meta or Mahasanye Meta, and that's like charming magic. And then you have things that fall under Prai or like ghost magic, Barang, Hunpean, all these different categories and classifications. And they're just different specialties or what certain people will be looking for. So if I wanted something for like wealth or for gambling or business or anything like that, I could use Gumentong, Aikai, I could use Tutok. There's a lot of different avenues I can take, and some of them are what we would call ghosts. Some are like you know outer world gods. Some are spirits of great masters, and some is just the use of specific herbal concoctions and remedies. It's very animistic, like I said.
uh, I mean it sounds yeah, I mean it sounds like there's basically a remedy for any kind of thing you want. It sounds like in a way, I mean I'm sure there's not every little desire you have. I'm sure there's not like a ritual for it, but it sounds like all the most common ones are met
Yeah, and
because we as humans we all want the same things at a basic degree. We all want the same things in life, you know.
it's true. One of the things that the Buddha would say is that magic is a fun distraction on the way to enlightenment. And when you ask some monks at temples why they make amulets and
Yep.
why they practice magic, they'll tell you it's to help ease the suffering in samsara, to help ease the physical life so that we can focus that much more on basically becoming better people and doing internal work to cultivate awareness and perception to a wider degree for our own spiritual benefit. But none of that's possible if you're screaming in pain, you're blind, mute, deaf, if you're poor, etc., etc. Certain things will distract us from this. And if we can ease the suffering of that just a little bit, even, then maybe we're able to accomplish more soul work.
Makes sense. I mean, it really does. But I mean, it's just. If you want, it makes sense. I mean, that all really does make sense to me. It's just it all ties into like my own little monkey was just screaming because she wants me to carry her to bed. Because God forbid she ever walks her own bed, Daddy has to be her servant and carry her. So so she did the daddy prayer, which is when she screams out my name until I come and find her. But, God, I love it.
It's effective.
So, well, if only it wasn't so effective. But one of the things that really intrigued me was your soul retrieval package you offer. Because I have talked to a lot of people about the Akashic records and past lives and all that greatness, which I was supposed to have a past life reading done a long time ago by one of my first guests, and it kept getting put off and never happened. And to this day, it still kind of irks me in a way because I find past lives interesting because I find the fact that, I mean, I believe in reincarnation. I believe we've all been here or somewhere else before, that we have all these past lives that we could teach us things. Like I believe it. I 100% believe it. There's been enough tales of it that are too undeniably true. So, what got you into doing the Akashic record work? Like, that's really what I always like to hear. What
Well,
people, what drove people to do that?
I learned from a variety of teachers over the years, and I had a very interesting experience with a Wiccan coven mother who taught me about some past life work, and I had a very profound experience that was not self-imagined, and it was really quite something. To try to put it into words is kind of insulting, but the takeaway was I learned this technique that I could then replicate to help guide others. And then over the course of working and developing other skill sets, such as hypnotherapy, traumatic regression work, energy healing in various different modalities, I found ways to kind of complement other tools by stacking them together. And so I found a way of doing a guided meditation where I could put people through a hypnotic guided regression state while also taking the spirit on a journey, getting them to confront some traumatic work inside of their neurology with the subconscious mind, and also diving deep within the spirit and taking the conscious mind on a journey. So it's like kind of like bilocation in a sense. We're in two places at one time, but it's a conjoined experience. It's quite weird. It's quite interesting. And the end result is you are able to process and let go of some basically what we call like ISEs that lead to abreactions, initial sensitized event, something that occurs that leaves a lasting impact on you and causes a buildup that triggers other things. And then you develop these patterns of thought and approach and action that were learned, that were imprinted. That's not you as you would be without that. So we find through this process a way to vent and let go of that while also seeing how it was possible in the first place for this to even happen. Was it chance? Was it an alignment of vibration? What have you? Where was the root cause in your samskar? Meaning the little ebb and flow in the vibrational you in the universe that is picked up through time and again with reincarnations, what makes you tick, your personality. Perfect example, you're drawn to music and you have a natural affinity for it, then it's likely to say you didn't just come out the womb a savant. It's probably been refined and honed over many, many lifetimes, right? So it's the same for, and I'm not making this as a justification for how some people get cancer or become victims of abuse and etc. But sometimes the way these patterns present, there can be an aligning match based upon other patterns of lives before. Sorry, that was a whole mouthful, but
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, and yes, I mean you're not the first person to say that. And honestly, honestly, it's true. I mean, if we are victims of abuse in every life we live, then we have to break that cycle through our own willingness at some point. We can't just expect our next life to be, oh, I'm not going to have any abuse this life. No, because your soul is kind of predestined to that because it's what you're used to and it's what you're attracted to, which you have to break that, whether it means going back in past lives or just dealing with your current life in some way or form that has to get broken, if I'm not
well,
mistaken.
the reality is that when we become aware of these things, And when we do work on these things and we're able to resolve them, then we give the most amazing gift to ourselves. And that's the potential of going into a new direction. An unknown, mind you, but if the current direction wasn't favorable, if it brought harm, if it wasn't leading to growth, then potentially any other direction could be positive, couldn't it?
I mean, sometimes it feels like anything can be more positive than what you're currently going through. That's for damn sure. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. In some ways, I wouldn't say the abuse way, but some ways I can relate to that. I mean, some things always seem more positive than what you're going through at that time. And there's a way to get to that. I mean, it doesn't have to be through past lives, even. I think it could be through currents as well, but you have to really want to learn the lesson and learn the lesson and learn how to stop it. You have to be willing to embrace it. You can't just say, "Oh, I want to do this," and then a month later give up on it. Like it's a kind of like a lifelong thing. You got to keep reminding yourself of it your whole life, like that you're meant for these better things, and then hopefully that'll carry over to the next life. Hopefully, we can't always say, but I mean, from what I've been told, because I mean, I don't know what you believe in as far as reincarnation goes, but from what I've been told, we are kind of we have goals each life we live in a way. And we have to either meet these goals or we kind of rinse and repeat the same lives over and over again until we meet that goal. And the goal usually is about bettering yourself as a soul, as an individual. It's usually about bettering yourself in some way before you go to the next life.
I think that a lot of what I could say has been said in probably more articulate ways and in many, many thousands of different degrees. And it all would probably be more or less the same. But as far as what I personally think, I think that that might be the intention. That may be, as you said, the goal, right? To better ourselves, to change certain things, to go about in a very specific direction when we come into this world each time. But there's the element of randomness and chance that we can never account for.
Of
And
course.
also, we have to take into account free will. And even if you have this deeply encoded memory in something, if you reset it, the amount of new decisions it could make that were not calculated as being predetermined are incalculable. So you could come into this world, we could say, with a very specific plan, specific goals to meet, or you're going to have to come back. Well, how do you know that you've even met those goals? How did you know you haven't met them until you're on the other side? And then when you're there, what's to say that you don't create new goals, whether you met them or not? Who's to say what causes you to come back or not, whether you're meeting the goals or not? I don't think we can really quantify it in such a simple thought frame. And I also don't think it's that complex either. I think everything adheres to change and everything naturally is inclinated to growth. And regardless of if we have a way out of this spinning wheel or not, why wouldn't you want to keep experiencing? And if you weren't here, would you know you're not here or would you be somewhere else, you know?
See, I mean, okay, well, let me come out and say that a lot of my beliefs when it comes to reincarnation are kind of extraterrestrial based in a way. It's under the belief that we're all really extraterrestrial spirits and that we always reincarnate on this planet. We don't always reincarnate as humans. That we reincarnate as different species completely, terrestrial or extraterrestrial. Either way, we come back as different things when we need to. Like that's kind of where my belief system is coming from. Is because I kind of describe the afterlife as a extraterrestrial DMV for spirits, where you're kind of just punching your ticket, waiting for the next for your number to get called to go back down.
I mean, I think it's a valid thought as any, and I tend to go with more of a Taoist kind of approach,
Of course.
and that is essentially things are as they are. I'll give you basically a small parable. So the Taoist priest was called to the land where two neighbors were having a dispute over this tiny patch in between both their properties over who owned the land. And this Taoist priest put his ear to the ground and spoke to the earth and asked the earth which one of the neighbors owned the land. And when he spoke back to the neighbors to relay to them what the earth had told them, he told them that it doesn't belong to either one of you, you belong to it. So essentially, I think it's really all about perspective. And for me, I choose to adopt a more simple perspective. You could be right, absolutely. Who am I to say that I know? But for me, really all that matters is the current experience that I'm having, and more so this present moment here with you right now. Outside of all of that, it's fun to entertain. It could be interesting or unique thoughts to explore, maybe even fun to try to figure it out. But it doesn't really serve anything beyond this moment for me. So I completely respect, your mind frame and your approach to how you want to understand these things, or where you've gone with it. But I just can't get my mind to go there because my mind's right here. If that makes any sense.
It does, and I actually love that you don't 100% agree with me because it just makes it because it see my perspective on the world changes on a it could be on a daily basis even honestly because I I running a show like this where you talk to so many different people in different aspects of the spiritual paranormal world. There are so many different belief systems I've heard, so many different thoughts I've heard on the world, and I honestly, I actually, it's funny. I've talked about it before, but I actually plan on writing a book one day about my belief system once I have it fully kind of planned out in my head, and it's gonna be probably unlike anything anyone's ever said before in their life or written in their life, because it's gonna be so many different ideologies put into one. Because I kind of pick and take the elements from people's ideologies that make sense to me, and I put it all together in a way that makes logic sense to me. Because I'm a science-minded person. I've always have been. That's why I love the paranormal because it's unexplained science, and that's why I love it because it's just like I can take all these different elements of people's beliefs and be like, all right, this little portion makes sense to me. The rest of it, not so much. This little portion, it makes sense. Maybe that is kind of because I feel like the portions that make sense to me make sense to me for a reason. I feel like there's a purpose of why I'm hearing these things and why I'm being told them.
You would probably be very interested in exploring Vedic science because they break down
Oh,
mysticism quite a bit.
I've had some Vedic masters on here, and yeah, it's always a good conversation. It's always a good conversation, but it's I have some. I mean, trust me, if you actually go back and listen to some of my older episodes, I've told my theories at different points for um that explain like why we're here, why certain cryptids are here, how extraterrestrials relate to it all, and it evolves over the time of this podcast. It's evolved immensely, but the core elements of it are usually the same, but it all kind of evolves, and it's I gotta write a book one day. I gotta write a book one day when my kids are grown and I have time. And I gotta write a book because it's maybe 20 years out, but it'll come, folks. It'll come out. It'll come out eventually. Yeah, it's gonna be my masterpiece. But until then, I'm here to do the learning, not to do the explaining. That's the point of the show. Is for me, for me to learn other people's beliefs and other people's way of thinking, not for me to sit here and try to get people to believe mine. Because I'm no teacher. I'm no teacher. I'm a student at this point. I accept that and I fully embrace that. I don't want to be a teacher yet because I don't know enough to be a teacher at this point in my beliefs. So I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of different religions put into one in my mind. Minus
Yeah,
Catholicism.
I often describe myself as just a guy doing things.
I exactly. I mean, I'm right there with you with the whole I live in the moment thing because I do. I'm not worrying about even when it comes down to the basic elements of life. I'm like, I'm not worried about what. Oh, this bill's due tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow's problem, not today's problem. I'll worry about that in the morning. I'll figure out a way to get it paid tomorrow. But right now, I'm not gonna stress myself out worrying about that because it's just you can't focus on the future too much. You have to focus on the now. Yes, you should think about the future, but don't focus on it because it's not going to do any good to focus on it because you need to focus on the current. Otherwise, your future is not going to happen. If you're stuck, there's a famous saying for that too. I just can't freaking think of what it is at this moment. My mind's not there right now. But I did happen to notice, however, that you do offer love spells and business blessings, which enticed me, and kind of entranced me for a second because who doesn't love? I mean, we've talked before about people who offer services in love magic and sex magic and all that in the show before, but love magic and love spells always kind of because like there's something you hear about when you're a kid, like oh come get this love potion and drink it, and whoever if you get the person you like to drink it too, then they'll fall in love with you, like the old Hey Arnold episode we all watched as kids, but. So I gotta ask, what kind of love spells do you offer?
Well, it comes down to like two different approaches, and one is the use of amulets. So I have a shop with more than 100 or so listings in it, and yeah, so we can use like salika, which is like charming wax made from sipung. It's like a beeswax, and it has different herbs. It has different essential oils, and it's not just basic though in that aspect. It's like, for example, with salikas, the wood that you use must come from a specific tree that the salika birds mate on, because the salika birds will mate for life, and when they mate they will come and they will return to the same branch. So, and again, this goes into the animistic properties and the animistic practice. So you're stripping little pieces of wood from that branch that is from a mated pair of salika, which is also a little bit of a secret in how salika is made. But you're then refining that with certain herbs that are known to be practiced for, elements of love or charm. They call like this one type of amulet they call miyamak, which means many wives, and you can be used in a couple of different ways. One being to essentially draw like multiple partners to you, like casual fun, or it can be used to cause people to be more attracted to you in general, or garner like sympathy and mercy from individuals. So not even just in a sexual way. So I use the amulets, which are made from special ingredients, oftentimes either made by myself or made by monks. At the very least, blessed by monks, and containing special sacred ingredients, and then having the kata, the proper mantra for activating it, the magic, and knowing how to apply and use it. So that's one method I take. I call that the more passive route. We use amulets. The more direct route is like ritual work. So an example of like a ritual I would do would be like matchmaking to Guandi. Guandi is a Taoist god that's often used for matchmaking. And so what I'll do is I'll take the donation from the person. I will get the red ribbon. I will write the names of the individuals on it. I'll take it to the Guandi statue. I'll have the priest officiate and bless it, and I'll take that route. Or I will do my own working using Naman Prai oil, which is also known as like ghost lady oil, which, I mean, necromancy is a bit of a loaded word, but when it comes to like love magic and things of that nature, ghost work usually is the most effective in that specific regard. If we're talking about like wealth magic and etc., I would be talking about like using Kumentong, Aikai, like windfall charms, etc. I wouldn't specifically immediately say ghost magic is the way to go. So it's kind of like depends on what you're asking for, depends on the approach that we take.
All right, I mean, it makes sense, and I never heard of Salikas. That's kind of interesting. I kind of want to Google a picture of them
It's
later, see what they
Thai.
look like. It it's a bird that exists in Thailand, I'm assuming, which
Yes.
I never even heard. I know
There
like
there
it's
might
not like
be an English word for it, but I have this horrible habit of learning a lot of Thai words, and only half the time I get the English translation for them, or sometimes there is no English translation for them. Like perfect example is so like Maha Sanye Meta. I can tell you that it's a charming field of like magic, but if we're going to translate it, it translates to loving kindness magic, but that's not actually like fully accurate or encompassing for what we're doing or what all it offers. So sometimes even the English translation doesn't help. But yeah, in regards to Salika, if you Google Salika, it's just going to come up with a bunch of like Thai amulets and like Thai terms.
yeah. I mean, of course it is. I mean, you'd have to actually speak to someone who knows both languages to truly learn the difference and learn what the actual translations are. But I kind of got to ask this because I saw on your site, and it kind of, I mean, this is a paranormal show first and foremost. So I saw you do exorcisms, which, as you sure you know, is a huge paranormal topic. So I got to ask, have you, and I know we're short on time here, but what was the most interesting exorcism experience you had?
There's been many.
I mean, you can go with the most frightening, the most moving, whichever way you want to go with it, but
I would say one of the more moving ones. I mean, it didn't have as much phenomena as some of the other cases I've had, and I've had like ones where literal like shadows, and I have on video like in my Google Drive black shadows dribbling out of the corners of a wall and then receding and retracting like it's alive. Like I've got some really weird stuff on camera. But that's for another day. Most moving one I had was where there was a lady whose son had drowned like 30 plus years ago. You know, she was elderly at this point, and she was seeing shadows in the house. She was getting basically strangled in bed when she slept, and just a host of what you would commonly see in some situations of like level 2 phenomena with a like malevolent haunting. And when we figured out what the root of it was, being the spirit of the deceased child had become a corrupted wraith, so a ghost that has become its own suffering, and then basically is devoid of any intelligence and becomes that emotional wrath incarnate, um, leaving itself devoid of any level of intelligence and simply reacting with pure malevolence. That's a wraith. We crossed the spirit over, and then the next day, I end up getting a message from her. She's in tears, and she's telling me that the craziest thing I would never believe happened. And she sent me a picture of a rose on her bed. And she told me that she at that night she felt the darkness lift in her home, and she had a dream where her deceased son was grown up and he forgave her. And I'm sure you can imagine the cathartic release. I mean, obviously it wasn't her intention for her son to drown in the pool in the backyard. You know, it was just, and I wouldn't even go as far as call her a negligent parent. Like, sometimes life just sucks, man. And
Accidents happen.
sometimes things just freaking happen. So you can imagine the guilt she carried all of these years. And then to find out that she's being haunted by her dead toddler from years ago, I mean, that's got to tear a person up. And then to have this dream where you're absolved of that, where you get this closure. And then the weirdest part for her, which I hadn't even noticed the day before, was that morning was Mother's Day. And she lived alone. On her bed, right on the other side of where she was sleeping, was a rose that defied any explanation of where it came from and how it came to be there. For me, that was a pretty moving moment.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I can't think of another word to describe it. I mean, that's, for anybody who doesn't believe that the afterlife of the other side exists, that just right there is stone cold proof. I mean, how does any kind of physical object like that just end up in your bed when you're sleeping? Like, and I mean, yes, and skeptics out there might be trying to say, like, I mean, what could a skeptic even say, honestly? Like, oh, someone broke in your house and put a flower in your bed? Like, what the hell logic would that be? There'd be no logic for that unless something was missing too. So I mean, it's just, and even then, why would they leave a flower? Like,
I tend to follow things in patterns of three when it comes to the paranormal. And one was, we had objective phenomena defying a logical explanation occurring in the first place. We had the haunting and the things that went into the haunting. Then we had the very deeply personal dream that followed right after that. And then we had the materialization of an object that also defied an explanation. We had three very separate occurrences that all had their own elements to it. And, you know, I'm very much so a skeptic, but, you know, it would be easy to just jump to the conclusion and saying that, like, you know, the ghost child, like, you know, manifested that. And the reality is, yes, some could draw to that conclusion. Some could draw to other conclusions. All I can tell you is what I've told you, and I don't know. I don't know. It seems likely. It seems possible. That's definitely a conclusion we can come to. All I can do is present the story to you. You draw any conclusion you want from it. All I can tell you is it was very interesting, to say the least.
As someone who lives in a possessed house, I don't want to say haunted because it's not really a haunting of any type, but as someone who lives in a possessed house that is has spirits around them basically on 24/7 basis, based on what I've been told. Like, I fully believe it. I mean, there's no way that it's anything other than what it seems to me. But I am also, I mean, yes, I'm a skeptic at heart to some degree. I'm not gonna just call everything ghost or call everything demon or shut out people. I don't jump to conclusions. I don't like to. But there is no other logical explanation for that than what you said. So to me personally, I'm right there with you. It's just there's nothing other than what that could be in my mind, which is pretty freaking amazing. That's honestly might be one of the best experiences I've ever heard in this show. It honestly might be. Which I gotta ask, because you said you spent time in Nepal, which is in Tibet, which is,
So
everybody
Tibet is not in Nepal, and you have to cross a border, well, a territory line. It's complicated, but I mainly just spent time in Pokhara and Bhaktapur and Kathmandu and a couple of other smaller areas. I never ventured
Hmm.
directly over to Tibet, but within a few months, that is going to be somewhere I'm going to spend a couple of days. I'm going to go back to Nepal and I'm going to cross over into Tibet and then probably do Bhutan as well.
Well, you said Kathmandu, so now this got me curious because that's all Himalaya territory. And do the monks speak of the Yeti over there?
They do. Um, they tell weird stories. I met a Jankri. Jankri is like the Nepalese version of a Tayajarn. It's like a shaman there. So I met a Jankri who told me he had gotten lost during a trek. He was basically doing. I don't know what the Nepalese equivalent of the word is, but in Thai we call turong. Turong is like a spiritual walk, a spiritual pilgrimage. So this Jankri was doing a turong and he found himself lost on this trek and exposed to the elements and limited on supplies, and he saw steam coming out from this kind of like fissure in the land, and he crawled next to it to get warm, and he could see light coming out of it. He felt it and could tell that the steam was coming from there, but it didn't appear to be like an undercurrent of a pocket of water, like hot natural water under the surface. It looked like it was leading into a bit of a cave. So he was able to fit through into it, and he came into like a place that opened up, um, and gradually kind of like he said he marked it as the terrain was changing from like a cave to more um, I would describe like a forest from the way he described it. And the seasons changed, and he saw something that, by many accounts, would be described as like a bipedal, large, humanoid, hairy type of being that ran as fast as it saw him, and he spent a little bit of time. He said it got. He said he got distorted with time in this area that was like basically looked like it was in summer, and then when he came back and he went through that fissure, he noticed that the season had changed on the other side as well. He had been gone for about a month and a half, even though he had only been in that cave for maybe about a day, and he couldn't really explain it. And when he got back to his village, he was like basically thought to have been assumed missing and dead, and time had passed. So it had been like a month and a half, but he said for him the experience felt like, and as far as like eating and drinking, like he had only been gone for one day, not even a full day.
Which, shit. Okay, folks.
It's a lot to wrap your mind around there.
No,
And I'm telling
it's
a secondhand account from him.
oh, I mean, it's honestly to me, it's not even that much to wrap my head around. I'm just kind of flabbergasted almost because, folks, we just had our first official Yeti experience on this show because we've yet to have anybody on from that part of the world. So, but see, the reason it's not really hard for me to wrap my head around is with the whole Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti phenomenon, whatever they're called in every other part of the world, Yowie, whatever. There are beliefs that they are ultra terrestrial creatures, which means they come from other dimensions. And if this monk somehow, by going through that fissure, crossed into another dimension for what he felt like was a day, time passes differently in different dimensions as far as we are told and know. So this may just kind of prove that they are ultra terrestrials. And I mean, if he saw a bipedal hairy creature, then in Nepal that would be the infamous Yeti, or one of them, because I mean there are supposedly 6 or 8 species of them. But I mean, it would definitely lend some credence to the belief. I mean, I personally hate the term abominable snowman because I think it's a simplified version of what really exists. But I mean, it's just And that's why I had to ask. As soon as you said Nepal, that question's been in my mind for a good half hour, 45 minutes now. Because as soon as you said Nepal, I was just like, oh, I gotta bring this up. I have to, because I know there's gonna be something. There's gotta be something there, and I was not disappointed in one damn bit. Woo! Okay. Well, I did have one more question I want to ask, and then I will gladly let you tell people where they can find you and all that good stuff. What is, because I don't think I've actually talked to someone who's Taoist before on this show, at least. What is the Taoist belief when it comes to extraterrestrials? Like, is it talked about in the book, in their teachings at all, or
So, my understanding, and of course, I can't speak for the whole of different sects and etc. My teacher comes from the Mao Shan sect of Taoism, and they're the ones that are famously known for corpse walking. If you've ever heard of that. So, anyways, the perception that Master Yang, Sifu Yang, my teacher has given me was that some of the deities that are kind of like prayed to or worked with in Taoism are known as dragon spirits. And I do have a very, very interesting picture. I'll send it to you via email after the show, but I will just ask that you don't publicly release it. But it's a
of
very, very
course?
interesting picture of a dragon manifesting on camera during a Taoist ritual. Um, so they definitely believe in them, and they believe that they can be called. And a lot of times when they're referencing dragons, they're talking about them as these otherworldly beings, not just some spirits or something that comes from here. Um, that's kind of what I have to say on that, or at least what I can say.
Of course. I mean, yeah, and yeah, please do send it to me. I won't use it in any way or shape or form besides for my own personal enjoyment. But um, yeah, I mean, and I see. I've been told tales of dragons that were extraterrestrial in nature, and I've also been told tales of dragons that are purely terrestrial in nature and exist in the mines of Pennsylvania. But from what I've been told, but and that was actually by a very reputable paranormal investigator, so I kind of believe him. But whether they're both extraterrestrial in nature or not, who the hell knows? I'm not one to tell and know, so I speculate. But Jesus. I wish I didn't save some of this stuff for the end. I really don't because I want to expand on it. But well, we had a great conversation for a good hour and 10 minutes, and I can't complain. So I do want to thank you for coming on, Sadhu, because it's been amazing. And honestly, I'd love to get you back on someday for a second interview because it's been truly a fascinating talk, and I feel like there's so much more we can cover, so much more. But it is getting late here, and I'm sure you want to get your day going with other stuff as well. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or all the services we talked about that you offer? Where can they find you?
Well, the best place that you can go is my website, which is www.thesadhudah.com. That's TheSadhudah.com. You can find my Etsy shop there. You can find the different services that I offer, link to my YouTube channel, my blog, access to my books, etc., etc. And it's the best way to get a hold of me as well.
Well, there you go, folks. There you go. And of course, that website for all my listeners will be in the podcast description as well, because I always promote my guests because I have because not because I have to because I want to because it's just it's a great service that they all offer great services and you should check them all out. They can definitely help you if you have any kind of issue usually. And Sadhu's website is chock full of different things he can offer. So please check it out. I mean, you'd be a fool not to, in my opinion. But you all know where you can find me. If you don't by now, goddamn shame. It's been like 2.5 years. Come on. If you don't know, check the outro. It's there for this purpose exactly. Because I get sick of saying the 5,000 places you can find me. So check the outro. It's all there. And this hopefully will not be the last time you see Sadhu in this show. He'll be on in the future at some point. Maybe after my hiatus towards the end of this year, he'll be back on. But we'll see. I'll work with him on that in the future. But I do want to thank you one last time for coming on because it's been a truly amazing hour, and I can't wait to hear more from you in the future. But until next time, folks, have a good night, and I'll be back tomorrow with a supernatural author. So come check that one out as well. Till then, be safe, everybody, and just avoid all the shadow people.